One of my friends described his business partner, who's a strategic advisor, as when this guy gets on the whiteboard, money's coming out the other side. Like they can just solve problems in real time. You can bring them the chaos, they will figure it out. They're the people that you want to like rent their brain. That's
Mhm.
strategic advisor. Research innovator is the second one in this grouping. Research innovators solve problems by going away, doing applied research and bringing it back to specifically apply it to that problem and solve that problem.
You're listening to the Seven Figure Leap podcast. We're here to leverage rich relationships and smart strategies to take your business to the next level. Here's your host, Dustin Riekman.
How can you better grow your business by working in the way that you're actually wired? That is a question that I've wrestled with a lot, I'd say, especially over the past couple of years. But I've been very blessed to have today's guest as my guide in that journey. So, Macy Robison and I actually met originally through StoryBrand, and I've talked a lot on this podcast about all that StoryBrand's meant to me, and I'm sure I've mentioned Macy from time to time in that journey. And then Macy came over, was part of our podcast Profits Accelerator program. I found that her work was as beneficial, if not more beneficial than my work for her. And I ended up joining her flagship program. And she's been a longtime member of our Seven Figure Leap Mastermind. So it's a real full circle moment today. And we're not just going to wax philosophic about our history, but I love to give that context and like, where did this relationship start and where has it blossomed to? And so today we're going to hear a lot more about Macy's own journey, her thought leadership archetypes, and this whole IP that she has created that has changed my life in such a big way. And then we're going to kind of spend the second half of today demonstrating that for you as a listener and talking about my results of her work and digging into the details and the things we've actually been able to take action on together as a result. So with all that preface, Macy, thanks so much for being here. And I'm super excited to dive in. Please, take a moment and introduce yourself to the audience.
Oh, I'm so honored to be here. I feel like, you have helped me a ton. I look back at the shifts I've made over the last 18 months in particular, and all of them have been a result of being in community, being in person with the people that are part of Seven Figure Leap. So really grateful for that. As far as my background, I've spent over a decade inside the thought leadership space. The last decade, I was a StoryBrand guide at first, like you said, certified with them back in 2017
Wow.
as a way to help some of my clients better talk about what they do. And I've been the senior director of that guide certification for StoryBrand for the last 3 years or so. I've helped launch multiple New York Times bestselling books. And what I kept seeing with clients over the years is that brilliant people with incredible ideas were having a hard time getting heard in the marketplace. And it's not because their ideas weren't good enough. It's because they were trying to express those ideas through someone else's playbook, through someone
Mm,
else's way of showing up in the world, whether it was courses or whatever the case may be. And I call that the copy paste trap. You see someone build a seven-figure business or write a runaway book with a particular strategy, and then we think we can just copy and paste what they've done. But it doesn't work exactly that way, because that strategy they're employing was, I believe, designed for the way that they're wired, not for the way like I'm wired or someone
yeah.
else is wired. And I think the big light bulb moment for me was realizing in my own business, as I was trying to help my little voice be heard out in the world, that it wasn't like a discipline problem or a marketing problem. It really wasn't it was an alignment problem. And I pulled on my past experience from being a choir teacher and a singer, and pulled a lot of the things that I naturally say about the science of sound and resonance. And we use a lot of music words when we really understand something clearly for the first time. And a lot of the work that I do now came from that lived experience of music, and pulling analogies from there to get folks to understand that the clearer you're able to embody and walk your talk around who you actually are, what kind of business you want to run, what kind of things you want to teach, the clearer the signal is that you're sending out. And the clearer your signal is, the easier it is for people to move toward you. It's the same in singing. Like the loudest voice doesn't always win the day. It's the one that can cut through the noise. And that's what my work is all about.
I love it. Yeah. And so this word resonance, we'll use, resonance, resonant. It is a really beautiful word and it's a really key word. And I'm someone who, as Macy knows, I've been, trying to master that instrument over my shoulder there, the guitar. But I've
Guitar,
had,
yeah.
but I've had no musical background and training. And yet even though you have that deep training, it resonates with me. It
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense. And as we've worked together, what I've realized is a lot of these terms get thrown around in the business world, and we don't really like tie it back to this bigger picture of resonance and
Right.
of alignment. And I think signals and noise and all these things that we talk about in business. And so I think a good jumping off point here for folks that aren't familiar with your work yet. First of all, you got to go listen to the Own Your Impact podcast. That's Macy's podcast. It's always one of my top recommendations. She does a really wonderful job unpacking these ideas there and talking about the application of them. But I think for our foundation here, let's talk about this idea of resonant thought leadership
Mhm.
and maybe the foundation of that, which is your really, really robust and amazing assessment that you've created. And we can start talking about the different types of thought leadership, because then I think people will start to say, oh, that sounds like me, or yeah, that's definitely not me. And I know that's been my experience here, and it's really helped me dial in my own leadership style, my content. This podcast has shifted dramatically since you and I worked together in your accelerator program. So yeah, I'll just kind of hand it over to you, Macy, and let you talk us through this idea of thought leadership and these different archetypes and like how we can start to understand them. And then we'll talk a lot about applying them after that.
I love that. Yeah, I started all of this by having had the opportunity to be behind the scenes in a lot of different thought leader businesses, people who have written a book or who are maybe executive coaches and they have a methodology they walk people through. All the businesses on the surface looked very different, but I'm always looking for patterns. And I wanted to understand, what made someone like James Clear a runaway
Mm,
success with his book, and how was that the same or different than someone like Brene Brown, who gives an amazing TEDx talk in Houston and is suddenly everywhere on the scene. Like it feels like luck, and it feels like getting hit by lightning, and we can't go around hoping that someone's going to magically find us. We have to actually put our work out there in the world. So as I started looking for patterns and reverse engineering all of that, I was looking for examples of my own in my own life of where, the things that I feel like I could do well or thought I could do well, how they were showing up. And honestly, one of the first things when I tried to put my voice out in the world that actually didn't work,
mhm,
that got me thinking about these archetypes, was when I had the chance to go to a training that Amy Porterfield was putting on. She's an expert marketer. She talks a lot about creating online courses. She was doing an in-person event and I wanted to be there. So I had a course I wanted to write called Book to Business. I was really excited about it. I thought it was great IP. I'd helped a lot of people build businesses around their books and had some lived experience doing that in other people's businesses. And, I knew that building a course was the way I was going to like put my stamp on the marketplace and make the revenue I wanted to make. I went to this live event and I couldn't write my course. I was sitting there learning all the things. I'd used Amy's frameworks to write courses for other people and I couldn't
mm,
write my own. And it was so frustrating because I kept thinking I must just have a discipline problem. I don't know what is going on. At the end of the day, they had a live coaching session with Amy's team in this big ballroom, and I sat over to the side by myself for about 45 minutes, just trying to write or story brand my way through creating this course. And I finally just gave up and went and sat by Amy's curriculum director and just coached other people through the way they were talking about their course. And had just been frustrated about that for years. It turns out my archetype, which is transformational guide, we'll talk about that in a minute. That's my top archetype on my own assessment that I've taken, was screaming at me like, this is not how you build things. I had not taught this material to anyone yet. I hadn't walked, even though I'd worked on courses with other people's material, I hadn't walked anyone through my book to business
mm,
framework yet and hadn't really let that framework emerge through the relationship I was building through the person I was coaching it for. And I realized that after the fact, because when I started building this resonant thought leadership system and these archetypes, I did start with one-on-one conversations where I was walking people through these ideas and seeing the lights come on and using the transformation that was happening in that one-on-one conversation to start to make note of what was working, what wasn't, and building from there. And so that was just I think a great permission slip to take that information and start looking at the other ways people were building thought leadership platforms, expertise, the way they were generating revenue from those things. And I started looking at people we all know, like Seth Godin or Marie Forleo. Like Seth publishes a daily blog post
Yep.
every single day. Marie Forleo does B School. She has very structured, comprehensive educational experiences. She launches them once or twice a year. They're both wildly successful. But if you told Marie to write a daily blog like Seth does, that wouldn't work as well. And Seth has built courses, but they're very much him and how he's wired. And it's not because the strategy is bad, it's because it's the wrong strategy for how they're wired. So, with all of that in mind, started reverse engineering and came up with 10 archetypes. And they all kind of group together into different categories around how people express themselves and how they guide transformation in others. So, transformational
Before we
guide.
hop right
Yeah,
into the 10, there's a couple of things you
I
said
love it.
there that I really want to highlight as
Yeah,
a
let's do.
sort of to set context to someone's listening. It's not a lack of knowledge, right? Like
Mm-mm,
you've created courses for other people, right? You know
right.
how to write, you know how to speak, and we all have some skill sets in those areas, right? But I think the real distinction here, we're all, it's very often that we're really talented at helping people with their IP, intellectual property. But when it
Right.
comes to developing your own and selling it with confidence and delivering it to get results, that's where this idea of resonance really starts to, I don't know, like exponentially become important, right? So
Mhm.
doing client work is one thing, but when it's your own stuff and it's in your brain and it's from your own lived experience, the way that you're able to like distill that and deliver it to others, that's where this resonance piece really comes in. I think it's
Right.
just a really important distinction. It's when it's your thought leadership, that's when this becomes extremely important. So I know you're going to go through the different archetypes and people are going to start having these aha moments. And we're going to tell them, pretty soon to go take the quiz and get a custom assessment for this. But I just wanted to make sure that people heard that because you've helped so many other people with courses, but you're sitting in a room. It's not that you couldn't create a course, it's that you hadn't yet
Right.
guided people through this material, and therefore your transformational guide spidey sense is like, this is not how I deliver the best value.
And the funny part of the whole story to me was that instead of just leaving and going back to my hotel room, I was like, "Well, I'm here. I might as well go help people," which is
Yeah.
exactly what I'm wired to do. And that went on to like cultivate a relationship with Jill, her content director. And I ended up getting to work with Amy's team as a result of just leaning into the way I'm actually wired. So I'm glad you double clicked on that because it's I think we all have moments when we're sharing our own ideas where it feels harder than it should. And in contrast, ideas where it just feels effortless. Like
Hmm.
we're having a conversation and people are like, "Yes, I'm ready to work. Tell me where to sign up. Like send me the link. I'm ready to go." And puzzling out the difference between those two situations can feel really frustrating and confusing. But I think a lot of it has to do with resonance. The story I tell a lot is when I was a music teacher, I loved teaching the science of sound, especially when I was teaching general music. I had in my little inner city classroom in Columbus, Ohio, a lot of brick walls, a lot of hard floors, and I had a piano and instruments in the back of the room. And to start this unit, I would press the G above middle C on the piano and the snare drum would vibrate. And those kids thought there was a ghost. They could not figure out what was going on. They thought it was so crazy and they kept making me do it again and again. But to illustrate what was happening, which is sympathetic resonance, that snare was the same tuned to the same wavelength, which is
Mm,
another thing we say a lot when
yeah.
something rings true to us, as that specific key on the piano. And so the snare would vibrate because they are tuned to the same frequency. And when something is free to move, it will move. I mean, you as an engineer know that probably better than anyone.
Yeah.
But what I would also show them is when I would hit a different key, the snare drum wouldn't do anything. And I think sometimes when people don't move right away or get excited about our ideas right away, we think our ideas are incorrect. So we start throwing different things out there when if we would just stay true to our wiring, true to the way that our archetypes express themselves and guide transformation in others, we will find more of those people who are tuned to what we're doing, who are free to move, who will start moving toward us. And that to me is what these not just the specific archetypes themselves, like the top one on the test, but the blend of like your top 4 or 5,
Mm,
which you
yeah.
actually helped me uncover that in a call, has been really instructive for folks because it really is I guess, the unique summation of who we are and how we show up. And I think that's why I love the analogy of music and even specifically the voice. My voice, my speaking voice is mine. And it's because of how I'm built, how long my vocal cords are, how I'm specifically wired as a human being walking around on the planet. And the way we show up and interact with others in this way is very, very similar. And so when we know what that is, when I'm taking a singing lesson, when I know that I'm standing up correctly and I know I'm singing the right songs for me, I can really create magic with my voice. We all hear singers that do create magic for us, but not every singer is for everyone. And
Yeah.
thought leadership is very much the same.
Yeah. Like another word that comes up for me is, as you were describing the snare drum and the piano, is just like a vibe. It's like
Yeah,
I vibe with that
exactly.
person, or yeah, we're on the same wavelength, or like I resonate with their message. Like these words are all like dancing around this idea. So yeah, I would love to talk more about the archetypes themselves, and I think this is like really genius words that you've given to things that we all feel and we've all experienced when we're trying to deliver our unique gifts, out into the world. So yeah, let's start to unpack them. I think this will be fun.
I love it. So, like I said, there are 10 of them, and I think they're easier to understand in their groupings, their frequency groupings. I'm going to use another music word to
Yeah,
pull these things
frequency.
together. There are 4 frequencies that kind of group these together. The first frequency has 3 archetypes in it. The first frequency is called expression led. And what that means is I think and express myself and guide transformation in others most effectively by actually the act of expressing myself. So the 3 archetypes that are in that frequency group are resonant orator, which is I use my voice to express my ideas. I'm a verbal processor. I am most magnetic when I use my voice to express the ideas that I've come up with. The second one in this group is called wisdom writer.
Mm.
Similarly, I express myself through writing. That is the way that I know what my ideas are. I have to write them down to see them form. And then, like, oh, that's it. Words matter a lot. Several of my clients who've been authors do have this archetype. It's not required
Hmm.
to write a book, but it's kind of the way that they are most magnetic. One client in particular has built her entire platform putting words out into the world, first as a blogger, on Twitter back in the day. Now she's on Substack. She's written several New York Times bestsellers. Her words are magnetic when she gives herself the time to write. And then the third one in this grouping of expression led is visual thought architect. And similarly, they're the people who can't express our ideas without drawing them,
Yeah.
without like drawing a framework, drawing a map. We have a colleague in the StoryBrand community who very much is this way. He's always drawing things, and that's how he gets his ideas out into the world. So that expression led is kind of the first grouping. Resonant orator, wisdom writer, visual thought architect, they need to express themselves to get their ideas out into the world. And so naturally, like social media is very not easy. It's not easy for anyone, but you literally just have to start talking or you literally just have to start writing. And so that is kind of lends itself to sharing your ideas out into the world in the way a lot of us do now.
I like that a lot. So
Yeah.
expression led, resonant orator, wisdom writer, visual thought architect.
Architects.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and then it's
Those
gonna be
really
really fun when we start blending these and we talk about my specific
right.
set of these. But yeah, let's keep going. I don't know that I've actually heard the 4 groupings before, Macy, so
Okay.
I'm taking diligent notes as we go as well.
I love it. Well, we'll get into it a little more when we look at your expanded report. So the second frequency grouping is experience led,
Mm.
and both your archetype and my archetype are in this group. Experience led is I think I communicate, I understand, I guide people through transformation by guiding them through transformation or designing a transformative experience, helping people get from point A to point B.
Mhm.
And the difference between the 3 archetypes in this frequency grouping is the way in which that happens. So my archetype, my top archetype on the test is called transformational guide. And that is those one-on-one conversations, that relationship that gets built, like teaching something to someone and seeing the light come on in their eyes and realizing, okay, the way I just said that made sense. I need to clock that and move forward. Yours is in this grouping too, which is experience facilitator. And that is not just facilitating in groups, which you do so well, but designing a container, designing an experience that actually moves people through a transformation. You don't just teach people about podcast guesting
Right.
or 7-figure leaps. You design an experience that moves people through transformation. And that's why your podcast accelerator creates the results that you do. If you just sat down and tried to write about it,
Yeah.
without having this facilitated experience, it would miss the thing that makes your specific work so powerful. But because you've created that and built that into your offer, you've been able to like derive a lot of results for people who have walked through this experience with you. And then the third in this grouping is digital learning architect.
Mm,
And that is creating transformation, but doing it through structured curriculum. So that would be Marie Forleo or Amy Porterfield,
yeah.
someone who excels at, traditionally maybe like an online course. But I also have some clients who maybe they're in marketing and they're really great at walking people through a process so they get the marketing results that they paid for at the end. It shows up in that way too. It's really about the transformation from point A to point B and the different ways we interact with people, with clients to make that transformation occur.
That's awesome. So, experience led frequency group, a transformational guide, which is Macy,
Mhm.
experience facilitator, which is me, and digital learning architect, which is maybe like the Amy Porterfield model. So, you in that room that day was like, well, it's not really my jam to sit here and create curriculum step by step that you consume that way. But then you sat with someone at a table and talked through their specific case, and you were able to provide a transformation by guiding them. Yeah,
Right.
hence the
Like I would
transformational guide.
exactly. So I actually, and when we look at your assessment in a minute, in my top five, I have all three of these.
Oh, wow, that's
So
cool.
transformation is a big deal for
Yeah.
me. But digital learning architect is the lowest of the three. And I was trying to start with something that was pretty low and kind of force my way through it. Where now, if I wanted to create an online course, I would do what I've been doing for the last year or so, teaching it one on one first, and then seeing if I could move that into a group setting, which we did with my accelerator that you went through
Yeah.
over the summer last year, which was a blend of one on one and group experiences. And now, if I wanted to do something that was more standalone, I probably could structure something like that. But I learn a lot, and I think it's important to have conversations with people. So I'm still kind of in the space where that's how I'm leveraging my archetypes.
Beautiful. All right. What's the next group?
The next grouping is called Insight Led, the next frequency group, Insight Led. And that is all about solving problems and analyzing systems.
Mm,
So these three kind of show up differently, but the thing that they have in common is the analysis of a system or solving of a problem. A strategic advisor is the first one. I have a lot of clients that come to me with this. We can talk about that in a minute. But strategic advisor is solving problems in real time. One of my friends described his business partner, who's a strategic advisor, as when this guy gets on the whiteboard, money's coming out the other side. Like they can just solve problems in real time. You can bring them the chaos, they will figure it out. They're the people that you want to like rent their brain. That's
mhm.
strategic advisor. Research innovator is the second one in this grouping. Research innovators solve problems by going away, doing applied research and bringing it back to specifically apply it to that problem and solve that problem. I think of someone like Adam Grant
Yeah.
in this archetype. If you listen to him talk, he is constantly spouting research that he's already done to solve a problem. He has this encyclopedic way of keeping it in his brain and is able to bring it up at exactly the right moment when it's needed. That's one way of expressing that, but it's that tendency to solve a problem through research that is what makes that archetype what it is. And then the third is category creator.
Mm.
That is, we're going to look at this system and basically say the system is broken.
Yeah.
Like we need to find a new way to solve this problem. We need to create a new category so that this problem can be solved. It's people who don't necessarily want to fit in boxes, folks who score really high on this. I've had a couple who've taken my assessment who've been like, "Well, yeah, I don't fit in that." Like, right, you just proved my point. But I will call that out to you because that will like negate the relationship I'm trying to build. But it's all about solving problems, analyzing systems. They just approach it in three different ways.
I like that a lot. Okay. So insight led, you might think of
Insight
this
led.
as a little more of an intellectual strength, right? So
Mhm.
strategic advisor, research innovator, and category
Category
creator.
creator.
And what one of the really great things about your work in this, Macy, is the titles are so descriptive. It's like you don't really need even an explanation. If you hear resonant orator or strategic advisor, you're like, oh yeah, like I know those people, right? Maybe you know them as they're your clients, they've been your mentors, you've seen them on stage, you've read their books, and that's I always love having these conversations with Macy because she's got so many examples, like the Adam Grant example, Seth Godin, Amy Porterfield, and if you're in a space where you've been around these individual thought leaders, you can start to really see what it is about them maybe that you resonate with, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I love that. So that's 9. So there's a 10th, right? So is it in its own grouping?
It's by itself.
Okay.
It's all alone. And it was just, it's kind of a tricky one to fit in with the other groupings. I probably could have made a case for it, but it's kind of unique. Embodiment-Led is the name of this
Hmm.
frequency. And the archetype is called Principled Practitioner. And I'm thank you for saying that about the names. That's the story brand wiring coming to fruition here. Like, let's make this as clear as possible. Principled practitioner is someone who walks their talk, who is a guinea pig on themselves. Someone like,
Hmm.
I think of Tim Ferriss in this category, that he is never going to teach you something that he has not like exhaustively tested on
Yeah.
himself and kept journals and data, and the transformation that he helps walk people through is the proof that he's created with his own experiments. So I have a friend who, I was in Mexico speaking a few weeks ago. She was the only one in the group that had principled practitioner as her top archetype. And if you look at her marketing business, it's very much structured that way. She's never going to sell you something that she has not figured out, walked through, tested, and it engenders a lot of trust. But she was having a personal conversation with someone while we were in Mexico, and this situation this woman was describing to my friend, that person had never experienced, and she said, "I have no advice I can give you. I've never lived through that, but I'll be thinking of you." And just kind of left it at that. And someone was standing by listening and said, "I've never heard anybody say that before." And she reached out to me. She said, "That's me being a principled practitioner, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." Like,
1,000%.
you're never going to give advice if you don't have the trust of your own like experimentation to pull from. And I haven't had a lot of people take the assessment that have this as their top archetype, but a lot of people have it in their top 5. And to me, it just adds that extra grounding and trust of, I would never sell you something or teach you something that I haven't done myself.
Yeah, that's really good. So those are the 10, and it could probably be a little overwhelming to hear all them. So obviously the next step's going to be just go take the assessment. Macy's got a really cool free tool that you can go and get your own, customized report. So yeah, let's transition into mine. So selfishly, I would love to revisit this. Obviously I've done this, I've done a lot of work
Mm.
with it. And so I think this will be particularly fun because we can not only talk about theory of like, well, it seems, Dustin, that this might be good for you or this might be bad for you, but we can talk about what I've actually experienced in my business before and after working with Macy. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. And then after that, maybe we'll talk about how people can get started on this journey, and we'll actually break down Macy's business to kind of close out the episode today, because people always like to hear like what's working for others, especially if they resonate with your archetypes, Macy. And we can talk about my offers and how my resonant thought leadership archetypes tie into that and why they've worked
Yeah.
or not worked at different times. So yeah, I don't know. I know we don't necessarily have the visual to show the full report here. So I guess the best summation you might give, Macy, I'll let you kind of take the mic and lead us through. We're unpacking Dustin's results here for everyone else to listen into, and then we can talk about what that's actually meant in my business life.
I love it. Let's unpack it. So when you initially take the test, the result that you get right away from the system is the top archetype that
Yeah.
you scored. It's weighted. Some people aren't quite sure which question they should answer. Just answer the one that feels the most like you in response to the question that's being asked. It's a weighted test, which is what we'll see in a minute when we look at all the raw scores in the expanded test that I walk through with clients. But it will give you a lot of information. It'll give you your top archetype. There's a short video from me describing it. There's a podcast episode right there in the results that you can listen to that's very short, that walks you through some of the things that Dustin and I have been talking about. It shows you things that maybe you've probably noticed about yourself, just to kind of reinforce, reaffirm that this is how you communicate and how you guide transformation in other people. And if we can align your signal you're sending out into the world, whether that's through marketing, sales, or your offers, that might make you a little bit more magnetic, a little bit more resonant for the people who are trying to find you
Yes.
and find your signal in the noise. When you scroll down about halfway, it will give you your unique archetype blend. So it'll give you your top 5 archetypes. So for you, your top is experienced facilitator. Second is resonant orator. Third is transformational guide. And it says, it's a dominant strength or a strong influence for each of those. Then strategic advisor, then digital learning architect. So you can kind of get an idea of what your very highest score was and then how everything blends from there. But one thing I like to do with clients, I have a custom AI tool that knows what all the archetypes mean. And it knows that if I feed in the raw scores you got on the assessment, what that means in terms of your specific archetype blend or your specific voice. So for you, yes, experienced facilitator is the top score, but your raw score, your raw percentage based on all the weighting of the points behind the scenes was 63%.
Okay.
That's an experience led frequency, like we talked about. So, in this context, that basically tells us that's a dominant score, and you are designed to create transformation through group experiences. That's your primary mode. Your secondary score is Resonant Orator, and that's 31% as a
Mm.
raw score. I've had about 700 people take this assessment to this point. I designed it just a little less than a year ago as a result of a conversation I actually had with you and with Cassie Shea, who's been on the podcast before,
Yep.
talking about all of this. And Resonant Orator, that 30% like threshold is another thing to pay attention to. It really is a strong influence. And for you, that natural ability to speak transformation into existence, to see the way people are transforming and talk about it, both on stages and in the room with people, tells us you can communicate what you do with a lot of presence, with a lot
Mm.
of ability to. It's like a facilitator with a stage presence combination. So you're not able to just only design experiences for transformation for people, but also fill rooms and inspire people to show up. And the
Mm.
podcast is a really great way to reach out and put your signal out there in the world because it's your voice going out into the world. Same thing with, I know you've spoken on stages and done a lot of things like that. So those two things together as kind of the top two work together, and they
Yeah.
are in different frequencies. So we've got I'm guiding people through transformation and I'm expressing myself to draw people that direction. So those are kind of the first two things.
Beautiful.
The third, interestingly enough, is transformational guide. So I know you don't do a lot of one-on-one coaching, but you do have a lot of one-on-one conversations
Yes.
to invite people into work with you. And so much of what you do is about relationships. And you've had the ability to track with a lot of, even in your personal life, just from knowing you, a lot of friends that you've had for years, people that you've kind of tracked with one on one and been a guide to them. They've been a guide to you. So that piece shows up as well as just another way to guide transformation for other people. So it's 26%. It's not quite at that 30% threshold, but it's something that you can kind of point to as like, I can work effectively this way
Mhm.
if I need to. I maybe don't, from an offer standpoint, want to take on a whole bunch of one on one clients, but for the right person, for the right relational reasons, that's something I would do. And that's something I've seen you do both, in sales, in marketing, and in your offers. Strategic advisor is next. And you really are good at seeing patterns. There's a lot of strong discernment there. And it probably shows up in how you design the facilitation and the experiences you create. You're able to read the room and adjust. I've seen you do that in real time and solve problems for the people in the room. And then digital learning architect is your fifth. It's the lowest one. It's 11%
Okay.
as far as the raw score goes. That just tells us maybe a little bit not what not to do
Mhm.
because the threshold from 60, what is it? I'm going to look back at the number 63% to 11%. That's a really wide range
Mhm.
from your highest score to your lowest score. And so sometimes when that is the case, when that is the blend of the raw scores, that fifth score tells us like, maybe that's something not to worry about so much
Yeah.
if you don't want to. Like if you don't want to create an online course, you don't have to. If it's in context of the overall transformation you're providing for people, which I know that inside the Podcast Profits Accelerator, you do have some structured online courses and workshops that you've taught and recordings that people have access to, that if they want to use them, they'll be helpful, but it's not required.
Yep.
You can get everything you need in the room with people. So I taught a workshop yesterday and it was interesting. We were going through all of these raw scores and blends with the people who were in attendance. And some people had profiles like yours where there's a really evident, strong top score in the archetypes. And then the spread is really wide in terms of the lowest one is actually pretty low. But then we had other folks that are more wired like me, which mine, I have transformational guide, resonant orator is my second as
Okay.
well. And then I have strategic advisor, but they're within a 6 point spread of one another and they're all above 30%.
Wow.
And then my next two are in the high 20s. So the delta between my highest score and my lowest score isn't very wide like yours is. So I've kind of got all five of those things to play with, which somebody said, that sounds amazing. I'm like, it actually, we always want what we don't have,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
yes, there are a lot of things that I can kind of play around with, but I can go on side quests really easy because there's
Yes.
a lot of stuff that can pull my attention in different directions. And I've got to be really disciplined about remembering things happen in conversation. I need to use my voice to invite people to work with me, to listen to me, that's why I have a podcast as well.
Yep.
And then strategic advisor is like, and if I can help people solve problems, those three things together kind of act as a three-legged stool, and they all need to be showing up in some way in the signal that I'm sending out for me to send out the clearest signal.
Yep. Yeah, that's really interesting. So, experienced facilitator, kind of the dominant one, resonant orator under that, and then transformational guide. And then it starts to drop considerably after that for me. And so, yeah, just like a quick reflection.
Mm.
I have an engineering career. I have an engineering degree and a master's degree in engineering. And so, I think what's important for people to hear in this is if you only knew that about me, it's like, oh, he taught at a university and he like did a whole bunch of like high level client work and expert witness testimony and all this stuff.
Mhm.
In engineering, you may think, oh, he's a, maybe a strategic advisor or a research innovator, kind of like this intellectual, nerdy application of knowledge. But while that is kind of where it started, where I really found my footing in 17 years of consulting, is I was the person they called when, hey, we've got a mayor, an angry resident, a real estate developer, attorney, and a city, engineer, a technical person. We need you to come in and like get them on the same page, right? So
Right.
my role is typically getting people around a table, talking through things in ways that would relate to each of them, find out what their individual goals were, and let's like get a game plan that works for everybody. The
Mhm.
other setting that I thrived in, although I grew to not, want to keep doing it with a young family, lots of night meetings in city council halls where I'm standing in front of the room, guiding through people through very technical concepts, but trying to build consensus around them so
Right.
that we can kind of find a win-win-win path forward. And I was doing that when I was 21 years old, and so, and of course I didn't recognize it at the time, but in my engineering application, these gifts sort of like floated up, and that's what I got known to be as like the person for those kind of situations. And then when I, left engineering and got into initially, a meat stick business and some other things, even in the meat stick business, we tried a lot of things that were traditional e-commerce strategies of like paid ads and sort of an
Right.
anonymous faceless brand, right? But the thing that actually worked for our brand was me getting on podcasts and telling the story behind the brand, and me going to trade shows. Even as an introvert, I had a high degree of competence in stopping someone, hearing their story, talking about our brand and connecting those dots for them. And often sort of a semicircle would form around the table, right? And I'm like talking to
Yeah.
this person, and sort of like building an experience around something as simple as like sampling a meat stick. And then when I transitioned into the coaching world, I can do one-on-one, to your
Yeah.
point. And that's how I started. That's how most of us start. And it was always like good, but not like energizing for me. It was like, I can do this. People seem to like it okay, but like,
Mm.
I'm not really like looking forward to logging into the Zoom call. And only in finding, what I would consider a God given unique ability in these groups that it really start to take off and shine. And then the whole growth trajectory of my professional career really took off when I did that. In fall 2022, I put the first group together and was very nervous and didn't really know if I had what it took, but within the first call, I'm like, this is it. Like this is my gift. I curate really cool people into a room and I give them something to work on together, and they start helping each other more than I'm even helping
Yep.
them. Right. Cause it's not about me. It's about the group and the energy and sort of the tribe that gets formed. And so last thing I'll say on that, snapshot here in 2026, flagship program, Podcast Profits Accelerator. We work in groups of 12, and then we have a community that we can get some different types of experiences. But there's every day of my life is facilitating some sort of experience in
Mhm.
the community. And then we have the mastermind that Macy's part of, which we do similar structure, but a different outcome focus. And then we do in-person experiences, which is something I never thought I would really enjoy. And I found the parts that I don't enjoy, like planning and logistics, but getting people in the room and sort of like taking the vibe check and figuring out, what's going to really work here, and working on my feet to hopefully create a transformational experience in the moment for people, often by connecting them to each other as much as what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's so affirming. And I'm sitting on the other side of having worked with Macy in a deep way, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's causation here, not just correlation, right? Like I don't have the offers I have only because it just naturally happened. It's also changed a lot over the past year after working with Macy, and just really doubling down into the things that I'm best at. And I don't
Right.
know if you know this, Macy, but and it came up for me as you were talking about that transformational guide being a strong part. Every person that comes into our accelerator now, I actually do a one-on-one call with, as sort of a entry point into the experience,
Love
because
it.
I feel like there is that sort of intimate one-on-one experience that kind of gives them a quick win. And I know I can deliver that,
Mhm.
and I think part of the reason I like delivering it is I know it's one time, and it's not actually the value. There's so much more value to come for them, but I do like to start with that, and then we bring them into the container, and they've already got some momentum and some insights brewing, so that they have an even more rich experience in the group itself, which is obviously the core part of the offer. So
Oh,
yeah,
I love
I
that.
just kind of want to reflect back in my professional career how this has come up, and it's so spot on with my lived experience.
The thing I love about that too is just to speak to, the way you bring people in now with the one-on-one call. To me, that's part of the overall transformation now.
Yeah,
The one-on-one call is what kicks it off. It's not in isolation. It's what people need in that moment. And, we do this work with the archetypes when I start working with clients, because the signal is something we can adjust pretty easily and quickly, but we also get into the source of where that signal comes from, which, some of the things you mentioned about being in front of the room in the town hall meeting and, giving people what they need in the moment that they need it, or hating details, that kind of speaks to your working genius, which is something we walk through with clients as well,
yeah.
because we don't want to build something that is going to go against the way that you really are built and designed. It's the magic of those two things together that's really fun to see with your business specifically, how all of that has come together. So I love that.
Yeah. And to give sort of a couple quick examples of where this resonance has shown me what not to do. I've tried a couple different times in this business to have a course aversion, right?
Mm,
It's like, I got this information, I know the process works. Buy this course, if you're not ready to come in and do the full thing, and it just never works. Like it never really sells. I don't really feel good when people buy it. I'm kind of regretful. I'm like, I wish they would just do the real
mm,
thing.
right,
So
right.
yeah, there is a course element to the accelerator because we have a structure and all that. But all of the course materials have actually been created in group settings, kind of to your own experience with the Amy Porterfield
Mm,
moment that you had. And then right now, one of the things I've been working on for a while is a book, and I'm not a wisdom writer, right? Doesn't mean I can't write a book though. It just
right,
means I really struggle with the idea of sitting down and distilling new ideas into written form first. So I now have all the material for the book, but it's all come from, you know, doing group experiences and seeing what
right.
clicks, and then I get all my case studies and inspiration from the humans I've got to work with and provide transformation, and that becomes the book. So I'm just
Right.
not innately a person who expresses themselves in written form. Doesn't mean I can't write, but I'm very much a verbal processor, and I love
Mhm.
the energy of groups. And so it totally makes sense that experienced facilitator and resonant orator would be my top two strengths.
I love that you pointed that out, because I think two things with that. One, the final product you create is not as important as the way that it starts.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I heard you say there. And I think too, the thing that I've loved about this is it gives people permission to leave things to the side that just don't fit the way they're wired.
Yeah.
So, like you said, like not necessarily doing the course. Someone could look at your business though and make the copy paste mistake of thinking, man, in order to be successful like Dustin, I've got to create a group program, a group accelerator, and I'm going to try it. And maybe it doesn't work. It maybe group, maybe you should just do one-on-one coaching
Yeah.
forever. Like people think that one-on-one coaching is not scalable. That's not true at all.
Right.
There are lots of ways to scale a business. You can charge more, you can do a lot of different things. And so but the most important thing is to remember, like, starting with what you are best at, how you are wired is always going to win at the end of the day. We can always figure out a way to come up with a commercialization model that fits, or, connecting you to different audiences. Like our friend John Meese doesn't use social media. He's built a really thriving business by doing other things. There's always a path forward if you can stay connected to the way that you best resonate with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's talk now, the last 5 minutes or so. Let's just, to the extent that you feel comfortable, giving us a little inside peek of the business you've built. So you've already talked about your thought archetype. So that sort of will hopefully people will carry that over into what you figured out over the past couple of years of building your business. And you talked about you've came up with the specific version of the assessment like a year ago. You've had 700 people go through that. You've got an accelerator. You do kind of a hybrid. So I don't want to steal your thunder, but yeah, like talk about your business, how your offers are set up, and then maybe we can tie that a little bit to your own resonant thought leadership. And then most importantly, I want to talk as we close about how people can get started so they can really start to discover this vitally important, you know, naming and claiming of their own wiring so they can just feel really, really empowered to go make a big impact. But yeah, tell us more about your business as it exists today, Macy.
I would love to. It's been hard won, I will say. I feel like the lesson I always come back to in all of this is, these archetypes we've been talking about are part of a full resonant thought leadership system.
Yeah.
It's part of your core resonance, which is the who you are. I mentioned essence just a minute ago, like your working genius, your lived experience. If you're teaching from lived experience that isn't your own, but most importantly, the way you embody the things that you teach and walking your talk, that is the thing that I've had to come back to again and again and again when things have felt stuck in my business. I've realized over the past few months in particular that a lot of the things that I've built and designed are the things that I most needed. And I think the mess that we walk through becomes the medicine we give others, but we have to keep taking it.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've got this thing, I built this thing, this is amazing. And I would try to tell people about it or build an offer around it. And it wasn't in alignment with how I am built and it wasn't working. And then I would just come back to the drawing board and be like, maybe start with a transformational guides, resonant orator, strategic advisor combination to get the word out about what's going on. So it's been a work in process in terms of what I offer, but it started with one-on-one coaching. I still offer some one-on-one coaching to help people build out this full resonant thought leader system. There's 5 C's, your core resonance, which we've been talking a lot about today
Hmm.
with the archetypes, your content, having IP that is yours, intellectual property that is yours is a big part of this. Having a commercialization model that supports your core resonance and the way you're wired, having connection strategies to build an audience and not just a crowd. An audience is people who can buy, amplify, or do both. And then having a central platform, whether that's your owned website or the other central platforms like LinkedIn that you might borrow to help people learn more about you and build a relationship with you. All 5 of those things, that full system really needs to be working together. And I help people build that out in the accelerator you went through,
Yep.
as well as, one-on-one sprints. But to get people to that point, they usually start with the archetype assessment. That's free to take. People listen to my podcast. That information is also free. I have a new group community when people are trying to learn a little bit more about this, but they're not ready to invest, or maybe they aren't ready to jump like deep end of the pool with thought leadership, called the Resonance Collective. I give workshops every month. You get an all access pass to those workshops and conversations inside the community where we go through and troubleshoot some of these things, specifically around the archetypes. I offer one-on-one calls, archetype strategy calls, where I sort of think of the Resonance Collective as like the group voice lesson, like the
Yeah.
masterclass, and the archetype strategy calls like, I need a private lesson. We really need to dial this in and figure out what's going on with me specifically. So I offer those on my website if you've taken the test and you want to go a little bit deeper. And then people usually come into the accelerator to build out the full system. That's a one-on-one group hybrid where we meet one-on-one 3 times and meet 8 group calls over, about 8 weeks or so to build this full system out and then test it. And then I have folks that keep working with me on an ongoing basis. That will probably turn into a mastermind at some point. But it's been really exciting to help people install this operating system because I feel like it's been the missing piece for me
Yep.
to help everything that I do, any investment that I make, like working with you on podcast guesting or doing the mastermind or taking someone else's course on how to succeed on LinkedIn, having this operating system in place makes all of those things work more effectively because I'm not just like mindlessly copying and pasting. I'm looking at things through the lens of how I'm wired and I'm choosing the strategies that are going to send the clearest signal out because that's the only thing at the end of the day that I can control. So I'm writing a book as well, and that's
Mhm.
hopefully going to be finished, ready to come out later this year. And I've had a lot of people ask for a licensing program to actually walk their clients through this if
Yeah.
they're marketers or people who are in the helping coaching industry. It's really a help. It's become a helpful strategic mirror for a lot of folks and hoping to make that available for people who want to be practitioners of this archetype system later this year.
That's awesome. So some breaking news there. You and I will be racing to finish these books
Get the books
so
done.
that we can share how'd you say, hard won, not hard fought, but hard won, business results that you've enjoyed. So I'm going to close this out with a little story, but I think even before that, I would love for you to just tell us directly, like, where should people start to go take the assessment so they can start to unpack this for themselves? And from there, of course, they can choose their own adventure and work with Macy in a deeper way. I highly, highly, highly recommend the Accelerator Lab. That was my deep experience with this last summer, and it really was an inflection point in my business and changed so much. But even that started first with the assessment. So, where's the
Right.
best place for people to go take the Resonant Thought Leader Archetype quiz?
I know I need to make it shorter, but that's the best name I've come up with so far. So if you go to my website, Macy Robison, MacyRobison.com/quiz. Or if you just go to macyrobison.com, it's there in the upper right hand corner, like any good story brand
That's
trained
right.
person would put a call to action button. But that's really the best place to start. I have tried to design the results according to my own archetype. That's been a little bit of a work in process as well, putting some videos in there so you can hear me talk about it. The podcast episode on your top archetype is a great next step. And then from there, would love to stay connected through the podcast or through emails if you decide you want to lean into this a little bit more. And if you're tired of competing by trying to yell louder than people in the marketplace to be heard, I think one of the things I love about this work is that you can create a clear signal that cuts through the noise. One of the best illustrations of that is opera singers don't use a microphone when they're singing in an opera. They have trained their voices to fit in that gap that there's no sound energy coming from the orchestra. They all create their own unique sets of sound waves, but there's this gap called the singer's formant that the opera singers can slide right through and make sure they're heard in the audience. And to me, that's what this work feels like, is figuring out how I can align myself, how I can train myself and how I show up to make sure that that signal is clearly cutting through the noise that's out there in the marketplace. So I don't have to shout louder or exhaust myself. I just have to show up as me and be responsible for sending out the clearest signal that I can.
That's so cool. Wow. What a great, it's not even just an analogy, right? It's a scientific
It's actually
demonstration of resonance and how that actually works to, again, cut through the noise, right? To use another cliche, but I
Mhm.
love that with the opera singer example. So yeah, so definitely go to Macy Robison. There's not an extra N in there. Macy
No.
Robison, ROBISON.com, and then /quiz, or click the big button that says take the quiz. Yeah. So last year at our last mastermind retreat in Franklin, Tennessee, Macy had been working through this assessment and been refining it. And she was there for the first 2 days of our 3-day retreat. And then she had to leave to go speak at an event. And so it's really, to me, it's really an endearing moment where the final morning, we're all kind of sitting around a breakfast table and we're kind of giving our biggest takeaways and we're talking about the action we're going to take from the retreat. And keeping in mind, the retreat was not about Macy. Macy was a participant. She was not there providing this as like a workshop or anything, but just, there was this buzz, I guess, right? This frequency among the group. And it's like one person heard about it, another person heard about it. So it felt like by day 3, everyone had taken this quiz. And what was really cool for me was to witness going around the table without Macy there, and people just naturally sort of adopting this language where they're like, yeah, as a wisdom writer, I'm going to totally like make this my Q4 priority. And I'm like, yeah, as an experienced facilitator, I really want to double down into this like thing that we're doing in the mastermind. But people just started really speaking of themselves in these terms. And to me, that was like, I don't know, just fireworks and sirens going off that like this is really, really useful and effective. And it just makes sense. It's one of those things that when you know it when you see it. And I firmly believe that this is and will grow to become known as like one of the top business assessments you can take. And I think it's extremely important IP if you're in any sort of thought leadership space, which I think anyone listening to this likely is. So yeah, I just want to share that. Macy wasn't there to witness it, but I was letting her know after. I'm like, it's so cool. Everyone's like using the words that you created to describe themselves because they're so aligned to it, right? And it makes so much sense. And it provides these really sharp sort of guiding principles by which to build your business and figure out your priorities in your business. So
Oh, thank you for sharing that story.
yeah.
I will never actually forget being in Houston, getting ready to go speak, and you sent me a Voxer message and told me that story. And the only
In
the
real
only,
time. Yeah.
I think, analogy I could, like, relate it to is you hear musicians talking about hearing their song on the radio for the first time, and what a delightful, like, full circle moment. I will probably cry talking about this because I did cry when you sent that message. It was one of those moments of like, "Oh, it's working." Like, I've worked really hard on this thing behind
Yeah.
the scenes and tried to share it with the world in the most like clear way that I could, tried to provide value, tried to be generous. And I think anyone who steps into thought leadership, it really is like my thoughts have been helpful. I want to try and share them with you and lead and make your life better and be a guide and help you win the day. I think a lot of us show up in these spaces and that is our intention to make an impact in that way. And sometimes we get the gift of seeing the effect of the work we've been putting in. And it really felt like that moment of like someone sitting in a car and hearing their song come on the radio for the first time. And, I think it's that movie, That Thing You Do, where they're like running through the
Yeah.
street screaming and holding a radio. And it really felt like that. So I really appreciated you giving me a glimpse of that moment. That was like I just heard my song on the radio
Oh,
moment.
that's so
So thank
cool. I
you.
didn't realize that. But yeah. So if you want that moment, I mean, the place to start is to take this assessment and really, get to name and claim your, not just your top, right, but like your blend of thought leadership archetypes, because it's really going to inform and affirm your work. And so, yeah, it's changed my life. I'm so grateful for you, Macy. I'm grateful in all the ways that we've gotten to interact over the past, I guess, 3 years now. And I'm really grateful that you were giving us the gift today of being here on the show. So go to macyrobinson.com/quiz, get started there, and then go as deep as you possibly can. And working with Macy would be my strong endorsement here. So thank you again, Macy, for all you do for me, and thank you for being a guest here on Seven Figure Leap.
Thank you, Dustin.